All set?
We are all set.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to the Thursday, April 24th, 2025 meeting of the Bellingham Planning Board. Before we go any further, I'd like to have Nick stand up and lead us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. The first item we have tonight is a continued public hearing on Prospect Hill Village. Rob, can you bring us up to speed on that?
Yeah, so the most recent developments, I know Lou submitted revised plans that are dated April 9th. That was to address the first round of peer review comments. We have the second peer review letter, which the board and I just received this last night. So this is all very new information. I doubt the board has had really a chance to look at this. So with that, I know our peer reviewer, Dominic, is here, Dominic Rinaldi from BSC. I think it would probably be a good idea just for him to run through, just the letter. That way you'll have a little bit of up-to-date information. I know you have to review the comments and responses, but there are some outlying items, so sounds like Lou, you'll have a chance to address those.
Yeah.
I don't.
Just if you don't, the last time we were here, we revised the plans to show the access up Main Street that we discussed with the traffic peer reviewer at the last meeting. And that revised plan implemented some new drainage, stormwater management facilities that were previously reviewed. So BSC just recently had the opportunity to see all of those revisions and review primarily all the revised stormwater management and other comments that he had made relative to the stormwater management. So I think this is primarily this review is primarily stormwater management review that I think the board would be interested in hearing about that mostly.
Correct.
So, so Mr. Rinaldi is here, and hopefully he can go through his letter. And folks can, it's kind of technical and stuff, but I mean, he's the guy.
Dominic, if you can give us a 20,000-foot overview of this. Also bear in mind, we have a lot of the public here.
Yep,
So-
certainly. So, good evening, Dominic Rinaldi with BSC Group, peer reviewer for the project. Lou's summary was pretty good. I think most of what we have left is really, stormwater management questions, some of which came from that revision with the access road. If you go through our letter, I'll go through real quick. I won't necessarily hit every item, but I'll be a little more general. Item number 1, which has a few parts, is really about zoning review and some items from zoning that hadn't been included in the original package we had received. They are going to be looking, although I haven't seen it written other than on the response to comments, for a waiver from one of the requirements with regards to showing sort of all of the vegetation that's being retained. They have a lot of it on there, but it's a big area with a lot of vegetation.
Can I interrupt you for one moment?
Absolutely.
For the public that is here, this is a public document,
Yeah, it should be.
and you'll
Oh,
be
yeah.
able to review it online.
Yeah, if it's not already on the website, it will be. I think it is already on the website, but it will be on there.
But I apologize. We got it last night.
Yeah.
But we're trying to do, again, an overview. But go ahead, Dominic. I apologize.
Oh, no worries. So there's a few items of landscape plan and photometrics plans and architectural plans that they reference. I mean, those are things that we don't necessarily need if the board is okay with that. Our understanding is the landscape plan and photometrics have been submitted for the board's review, and that architectural plans are coming if they haven't been if they haven't been submitted since we got this information last week. Um, so we sort of refer to the judgment of the board on that. Number two is really about that sort of continuing fact that the project does have a portion of it that's in Franklin, and our understanding is the applicant is in discussions or communication with the town of Franklin, and it's really just, that the board, our recommendation is just the board sort of keep tabs on that to make sure everything is clear, as the town does have some requirements for projects within two towns. Um, Couple of smaller items moving on. So the sewer pump station, things like the sewer pump station, fire flow testing, things of that nature that our understanding have been submitted to the town, obviously just need to be coordinated. The final versions through DPW, sewer pump station and that design is really something will really be finalized in the building permit phase. But as long as the DPW is involved, we're good. Couple items there, just recommending that the board get some sort of final comment in writing from the police and fire, even if that comment is, we don't have any comments, we're fine with everything, just to sort of dot the i's and cross the t's on the permitting. And then as Lou mentioned, they sort of gave us a lot more information about that emergency access road that goes to the north, to Lakeview Avenue. It is going to be paved. They have designed some stormwater for it. They have a swale. The runoff will go into a swale that'll route basin on that lot on Lakeview Avenue. There's a couple items in there that are really just, as much cleanup in the stormwater calcs as anything. There's just on a project this big, as you make some revisions, a few things kind of can get jumbled. So just clarifying a few items. So that was sort of, if you're following along, sorry, I should probably give you numbers. That was like 8A and 8B. Um, 8C is one that can be resolved, but I think it does need to be resolved between the town and the applicant, which is there's a section of the access road that does go on a town land, and there's some significant grading over there. Um, it- there's an easement, according to the applicant, but it does look like, based on they maybe either need a little more survey to prove existing grade within that easement, or the grading may need to extend beyond that easement. And it's not something that's undoable. There's nothing over there, as far as I can tell, that would prohibit them from doing this. It's really just a function of, again, kind of dotting i's and crossing t's and make sure all legal rights and access are in place so this could happen.
Just so the board knows, this is the access road to Lakeview Avenue.
Yep.
There's an easement that has been granted by the town several years ago to allow that roadway to be constructed. So
Okay.
that's what he's referring to in terms of that particular comment.
Thank you for that.
All right.
Yeah, kind of on to 8. D, which is really, again, it's sort of fire department's purview, is that the intent of that access road is for emergency access only. At a minimum, we would think some signage up there. In an ideal world, maybe it's a couple of posts with a chain or a gate of some sort to prevent not so much people using this property as a cut through, because it would be a rather complicated cut through, but more the residents who live in this property in the future from using that as sort of an alternative access to their property, and out to Lakeview Avenue, which is not the intent of the project. But sort of what that is, whether it's signs or a gate, we really kind of defer to the fire department, as they're the ones who are going to have to use it in case of an emergency. But I would say, at a minimum, a sign that someone could point to in the future if it did turn out a bunch of residents were using this as an access point, that the town could point to these signs and say, to the management company or the condo board, whatever it may be, that needs to be enforced. And they seem pretty, on board with doing something like that. So I think it's easy enough. Yeah, and then an easement sort of through that Lakeview Road property once this gets finalized. Number 9 has to do with some work on 373 and 381 Prospect Street. So sort of out what I kind of look at as the front of the property. They made some grading revisions that clarify a few points, and will make sure that some overflow from it doesn't back onto the property, will go onto back onto their driveway, which is good. That's sort of number 9. Um, yeah, it's really number 9. There's some grading revisions, all good. Number 10 is something they already agreed to. They have a few roads which the town does allow, very, very flat roads. In our experience, those roads can be kind of hard to build right. But they are allowed within town. So it's just we recommend the board, if you do issue a special permit and approval for this project, that you include a condition requiring a good as-built plan of these roads to ensure that they don't have, weird low spots and things of that nature. So that's kind of everything that's not really stormwater. Well, there was a little stormwater management in there, but that's not just stormwater management. I don't know if anybody has any questions before I jump into the stormwater management.
Let's wait until he's finished.
Okay.
We have a question about what he's saying. That was.
Okay, sir, go ahead. Yeah, ask your question.
Dominic, if you can clarify your point number 10, what do you mean by a flat road? Are you saying no crown?
No, I'm saying longitudinal, so along the length of the road.
Okay.
The town does allow grades down as flat as 0.8%. And it's buildable. It's not like it's not done. But it is pretty flat. So just if you've ever seen them pave a road, it's they do a great job, but there can be some bumps in there. And the flatter the slope of the grade, the more likely that there's going to be maybe a little ponded area that would just pond water. So, it's doable, and just, providing an as-built at the end that clearly shows that it was built according to plan. And then if it wasn't, it doesn't get a certificate of compliance, that type of a thing.
So, thank you.
Okay. So moving on to stormwater management. So you'll see number 11, 12, well, most of 12, and 13 all kind of deal with some very specific town requirements for stormwater management that are in the town's wetland regs. Our understanding is there's some discussion about whether those are applicable or not. So what we've sort of said is we've made the point of where they stand with relation to those items. If those items aren't applicable, then they're not applicable, and what they have is fine. I'll kind of go through them quickly. If you have any questions, feel free to just jump in. Number 11 is about 1 foot of freeboard in the wetlands regs. So free, kind of traditionally, more commonly viewed as the distance between the highest water elevation in an infiltration basin or a detention basin in the biggest storm, in this case, the 100-year storm, and the top of the berm. And they have a foot of that. The way the wetland reg defines it is between that water elevation and an emergency overflow, which is not necessarily the top of the berm. It's usually lower. So in this case, they wouldn't have that. They've actually set their emergency overflow just a little tiny bit above their 100-year storm, so that they don't have the discharges from the 100, but they do, it is there for, future, bigger events, combination of events, things like that. Number 12 is about seasonal high groundwater. The Mass Stormwater standards require a 2-foot minimum separation. Wetlands regs require, in the water resource overlay district, require actually 4. They have 4 on one of their basins. The other ones they have somewhere between 2 and 4. As a side note to that, under the Mass Stormwater regs, there is a, which is 12A, there is a, if you have more than two but less than four, you have to do this groundwater mounting analysis, which they've done, and they've provided some backup information to us. That mounting analysis is good. The data they used is appropriate for variables, and sort of that's all clear. So that's sort of where 12 stands. 13, again, very local requirement, which is no increase in runoff volume for volume, not flow rates. The state dictates flow rates. This would be volume. So, and they do have one point that they have a slight increase in volume in the event. 14 was just again a comment about the emergency access road. So there's those few items that I mentioned before that need some cleanup, but I don't think it's a big deal. 15 and 16 are a couple of items that they just had a couple of things off. They've cleaned up and fixed. So those are all set. 17 locally, the town does require fencing around detention basins or infiltration basins. They don't have fencing. They've said they're going to ask for a waiver. So whether or not this board is okay with the waiver is entirely up to this board. I will say as a side note, most detention basins, infiltration basins, surface basins that are built these days don't have fences around them. It's usually kind of free access, well, both for me, just because they don't really need them. 18 is, oh, sorry, somebody about to say something. Sorry, there's a noise, I couldn't tell. No, okay. 18 is mostly just some information about some additional testing that we asked for, some soil testing and that we asked for that they did do. And sort of everything lines up with what they had in other areas, and all of their infiltration rates and seasonal high groundwaters all make sense to us and all seem appropriate for design. As a side note on that, there's one more item that's kind of in the town's wetland requirements, which is that the town very specifically requires 3 soil tests at all stormwater BMPs. They don't have 3 at all of them. I think they might have 3 at a couple and some other. They do, as far as sort of typical engineering practices go and the state's standards go, I think they definitely have enough that they've justified what they've used for design. So that again is kind of whether or not the wetland requirements are pending. 19 is really just some cleanup regarding some they have for most, if not all, of the buildings themselves. They're doing some small underground infiltration systems, and it was just some clarifications about what they're actually doing and how they calculated it, and they've cleaned all that up and it looks good. 20, I'm almost done, I promise. So 20 is about water quality and TSS removal. Mostly, and this is gonna techy and wonky. I'll try to keep it simple, but I think they're Lou and his team will understand what this means. Basically they've provided, they have a whole bunch of treatment trains. They have a whole bunch of sort of independent drainage systems, and they have sort of varying treatment measures. And what they didn't provide really is what you're required to provide is what's called a weighted average, where you take, the treatment level times the area, add that all up and divide it by the total area, because in every project, there's always a little bit of runoff that doesn't get treated, some stuff at the end of driveways, some stuff at end of roads that can't get picked up just because of the limits of physically grading these things and collecting this stormwater. I don't think it's going to come out on the wrong end of the number, which is 80%, but we do need the number, and that is obligation to prove that they meet it. Again, 21 is also a little wonky and techy, and I apologize, but it's they have it's a CDS unit. It's a proprietary treatment unit. They're like you may have heard of Storm Scepter and Vortechnics and other products. It's a similar product. It's a good product. You know, it's basically a big manhole that swirls the water and pulls the TSS down to the bottom. DEP has come up with a very specific methodology on sizing those. And they did not provide those calcs. It's a pretty straightforward calc. Like the worst case scenario, it might change the model CDS that they're using. It's not going to change their ability to use it. 22, some stuff in the O&M plan, which they've cleaned up and provided. And then finally, 23 is just one we put in there and we talked about it. We had, I forget if it came up, but we did have a meeting, an online meeting last week with Rob and Lou and Rob Truax. And this is one that had come up we had been provided by the town with a video that the end of the driveway by Lake Street, or on Lake Street, the proposed driveway, it looks like the runoff from the street drains onto this property. And when they put the driveway in, what we kind of talked about doing is maybe a little bit of grading that'll prevent that ponding right by the driveway, prevent any overtopping of the driveway, and really prevent that runoff from the town's road from coming into the drainage that they are proposing at the end of that road. They have a forebay, they have a swale. Really, you don't want all that. It's sized for their site and not for the Lake Street. So really kind of running, kind of grading around that infrastructure. And that's it.
Thank you very much. Rob, I assume you're gonna spend some time reviewing these.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I've already started taking a look at some items and pulling together, because we haven't received any formal waiver requests yet, but
those two particular things.
yeah, I would specifically request that you submit a formal request to the board, so that can be addressed. In here, there are the sections that are being requested. So basically, it's for the showing the areas of retained vegetation and then also fencing around the detention basins. I would recommend that, once the board has a chance to review this in more detail and the actual regulations and the zoning bylaws, that can be a discussion. So with that, and I just looked on the website. It appears that this is not on the website. We will get that on the website first thing tomorrow morning, so I apologize. So there's some other outlying items that I just want to mention, just because, we're getting kind of the end here, I think, as far as, rendering some type of decision. So some of the items, these were mentioned in my July memo and December memo of last year. But just items that also need to be submitted, or if you're requesting waivers for these, formally request. But I know one of them is the architectural elevations and building floor plans that we still haven't received. I noted in the December memo, there was a discrepancy with the narrative regarding landscape buffer in place to screen from Prospect Street and the recently constructed homes. You did submit the landscape plans, I think it was last month, which shows some landscaping, but I think I would take a look at that comment and just really take a look at the screening, because I don't think it's meeting the intent of that regulation. There is also a screening requirement. If you look at our use table specific for the use of townhouses, it's section 240-95. It's also in the memo. So take a look at that too, please. A big item that still hasn't been addressed is the compensatory floodplain storage. I know that there's going to be some filling for the crossing. You just need to quantify filling, quantify the compensatory.
It's all been done with at the Conservation Commission level.
Has that been put on the plans or anything?
I'm sure it is, because we've got quite a bit of, I don't know if you followed it, but there's a large replication area that's being proposed. That's
Correct.
almost an acre of, that's gonna be providing compensatory flood storage as well as wetland replication.
If you can just have Rob Schreck just double check to make sure that it's
Yeah, oh, yeah.
quantified.
Okay.
Okay, because that needs to be in
Yep.
our files as well. There's. It was already commented in that last comment, but just the detailing around Lake Street where, your driveway's coming in. That was in my memo, I think in December as well,
Right.
December or July. Making sure that there's some type of permanent stabilization method for those proposed slopes, that's gonna be critical as well,
On
especially.
the back slopes. yeah.
Correct, yep. I think that there should also be a discussion regarding the development phasing plan,
Right.
because that hasn't been really discussed. And then the other item as well, the October 23rd, 2024 Kleinfelder comment letter,
We're preparing to, comment, some,
a response.
response to that letter.
Okay, so that's,
That's in the work, so we understand. So, yeah, those items we'll work on now that we've got the major part of the stormwater and the revised plan. Both the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board are now operating on the same plans. So there are no, there should be no discrepancies between the two boards in terms of what they're looking at. All the data has been submitted. Of course, the Conservation Commission has different issues related to wetlands and replication and working in the buffer zone and construction sequencing and erosion control. Those are all things that are within their particular domain. So, but all of those items are now shown on the plan set that is in your, that's been filed, that Dominic's reviewed. And so we're just down to the, like, as Rob says, the finer points of cleaning up some of the comments and waivers. I might as well ask you, I mean, we have 70 acres there. Does the board want us to go out there and identify all the vegetative cover that's there or not there or gonna be there?
I think what would be helpful is, it's really the screening, that's the intent,
The what?
the screening. So
Sure.
that
Oh.
is,
Yeah, well, we prepared the berm. Obviously, no screening has been done at this point, but we've got it prepared to accept that screening when and if the project is considered approved, so.
between the landscape plan and showing
Yeah. We can-
anything to remain.
Of
that-
course, we submit we haven't received any comment back, so, if there is, for example, on the photometrics plan, which is the lighting plan for the roadway, we give it to a consultant to prepare. I have no idea whether or not it's acceptable or not. I don't even know if it's gonna light up the whole atmosphere. Of course, we're in a hole, but we wouldn't, I always think less is better, but it may be something that you want to look at for lighting, let's say, particularly. And it's in the landscaping as well. I mean, there's some issues where we may be deficient. And then other areas where we may say, we don't really need it as much there. So we submitted the plans, we look for a comment, and hopefully Rob will have a chance to take a look at it. We can, discuss it in light of the particular regulations that you have and try to match them up.
Okay. So I think, we both have some work to do.
Yeah, I mean. I
You,
think,
you need to respond to what we received last night. We need to review it. So what all, everything you want to add?
well, I think those are the outlying items that I have for the review.
Yeah, and it's substantial, I think.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of information in there that we still need. And as I mentioned, I mean, the whole intent here is to to close the public hearing and render a decision. I know this has been going on for now, what? Almost a year and a half now for this. We all love seeing everybody's face here, but I know that people are, it's draft night. You probably don't want to be here at the planning board meeting, so.
You feel like we have enough information and not enough of this is gonna change? I mean, we've got the waiver list, we've got a lot of other things that are still pending. They're not just mathematical calculations that need to be submitted at this point. Thinking we should. You think we've got,
What are you, so are you asking if, do I think you haven't enough and all the information to make a decision? Is that
no,
what
to
you're-
make the close the public hearing?
No, not tonight, no, not
Not
tonight.
tonight,
No,
okay,
not
that's what I was
tonight.
misunderstanding.
No.
We're not ready to
That's-
close the hearing. We want to give you you folks all the
Okay.
information that you need to render a proper decision when you view it.
You still have more to provide that you're saying.
Yeah, so the things that Rob
That's
has
fine.
outlined are those things that we're gonna provide, and, of course, we'll have some discussion about the landscape buffer, what he wants to see there, how does it comply? It's really, just modifying or revising plans that we've already submitted, so it's not.
I'm in agreement with you, but for another reason. We had the public come in tonight. The document was delivered last night. I know we have some very smart people out in the audience that may want to ask some questions. They will have an opportunity to look at this document beginning tomorrow morning. So, I want to be very transparent and, hear from the public.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we just got it ourselves last night too, so.
Yeah,
we haven't-
I understand.
I mean, we had the choice whether to come tonight and have Dominic come and review it with the board, or you wouldn't see me now for another couple, and Philip, he wants me to come regularly so that we can reacquaint each other, but I mean, we could have continued, but we thought that it would be productive to have this discussion tonight. And
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think it was productive to have Dominic here, and Dominic, thank you for coming out to just give the overview to everybody on
Thank you.
on the letter.
My view would be that we create a punch list of things that are missing and things that need to be required in order for the board to think, believe that they have all the information that they need to render a decision. And that's all we're trying to do at this point,
Okay,
go through the list. And Rob has been very helpful to identify some things that we had forgotten about, quite honestly. And we need to do that, so it's really, I'm not asking to close the hearing, I'm not
I
asking you to
didn't
make a
think you would want
decision.
it.
Yeah, no, we're not ready for that yet.
Nope,
so.
no,
Okay.
I don't think we are as well.
Right.
Before we go to comments from the board, I know we had one gentleman who has an engineering background. Is there anyone else that wants to ask a question? And again, I apologize that you don't have a document in front of you. But we will discuss this further. We just want to be very transparent that we got this last night. We've not had a chance to dissect it. Yes, sir.
As well as we've got Dominic here, question both to the town and to Dominic. Dominic, your point 12A talked about the difference in vertical separation of either 2 or 4 feet. There's a state and a town statute for the separation of groundwater from detention basins. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the state requirement under the Wetlands Protection Act, and that's sort of the generally accepted standard when there's no other standard in Massachusetts. The minimum is 2 feet of separation from seasonal high groundwater to the bottom of an infiltration system. And then there's some requirements if you have less than 4 and you're using that infiltration system to attenuate peak flow. So you're using it to hold back water in addition to infiltrate, which is pretty much what we do all the time. And then that's when you have to do that groundwater mounting calculation. The town has a requirement in their wetland regulations when you are also in the water resource overlay district, that the minimum is 4. Like it's just 4. When you're not in the water resource overlay district, excuse me, then the minimum is 2, like it is with the state.
So the 48-inch would apply in the WRD, which portion of this project in the road, I believe, encroach on. My understanding on a separate project by the proponent that's since been tabled, but the earlier housing project, he had formally requested a waiver from the town to waive the 48-inch requirement. They had submitted engineering calcs. My question to you and to the town, is there a comparable waiver for this project?
I can answer that. So there has been no waiver request for the 40-inch separation. I know Lou did submit, and that is on the website. There is a compliance document that Lou provided, which basically stating his interpretation and feeling that it complies with the regulation as it stands. I guess the other thing too to note is that this is in the wetland regulations, which is, usually Conservation Commission jurisdiction, which is a little bit of a gray area, but there's also the Water Resource District, which is in our zoning bylaws. And there is restrictions regarding excavation within 4 feet of groundwater, which I know, Lou, you did submit information to that point, and I recommend the board take a look at that document. That's in the drop boxes. It's on the website. That came in, I think, last month, maybe.
I forget, but a couple of minutes.
Yeah, it was, so that has been submitted. And I'll hold my conversation on that until maybe we can digest it with the board and discuss.
Any other comments from the public? Yes, sir, gentleman in the back.
Yeah, Tom Moreau, 513 Lake Street. We're one of the abutters to the project. Just comment on that last point. I know it's not up on the website yet, but about the flooding on the side of Lake Street. I know we've discussed this, it seems like endlessly. But did I hear you correct that you were showing that as a result of stormwater runoff from the road?
I think that's what was discussed, that
Okay.
there was some water that comes off of Lake Street. There's definitely some that come part of that intermittent
Okay,
stream.
because there are also occurrences of that flooding going across the road on crystal clear dry days.
Yeah, and I
And I know
think,
one time it's because the culvert going underneath Lake Street to the stream gets blocked up, but there've been times where that stream's still flowing from out of there and it's still flooding across the road. So I just
yeah,
want to make sure that's being looked at as well, not just, when it rains and runs down the side of Lake Street.
sure. And just to be clear, there's 2 separate areas, really. They're right next to each other. There's the culvert itself, which has the stream. That's the resource area. This other area it's further down Lake Street. It's kind of the low point, and that's what's, I think, collecting mostly water from the road, but then most likely bleeds into that intermittent stream back.
Referring to the area on the right-hand side as if you were taking a right off of Prospect going towards Cross Street. I mean,
Correct.
okay, so, yeah, that where water is flooded there quite a bit over the course, especially in the winter, but,
Correct. Yep.
okay, but I'm just, okay.
Yeah, and that's that area of standing waters, it's located where that center line is painted for the proposed driveway. So I think that's really the main.
Okay, again, my biggest concern is that does tend to migrate across the street here and then, even after a couple of period, a period of a couple of dry days. There, so, okay.
Thank you, sir. Much appreciated.
Yeah, Don Coelho, 511 Lake Street. I'm not in a butter, but I'm close by. But getting to your point, Rob, what we most often observe and what some of the videos that have been provided show is that the stream fills. It goes over the berm, it floods that area that you're describing with the center line. Yet it's not raining, it hasn't rained for days. So it's a combination. I'm not challenging the fact that some rainwater from the street would pour in. It's obvious that happens. But when we see the flooding, most often, it's coming from the stream, it comes over the berm, it floods that area, and then it sits there for an extended period of time. That can be weeks sometimes before it actually penetrates and drains through it. That's where the access road is gonna be. That needs to be taken into consideration, because that water is gonna come, it's gonna go somewhere.
Yep, no, absolutely. And I know when we did the soil testing, it had standing water and it had rain for a few days.
You
in
know,
that area.
obviously, I think there's the culvert that's going under Lake Street is undersized for the flow that's coming down through the streams from the pond that's up gradient. Mentioned this a couple of times that there is possible solutions there to mitigate that. Used to be a dam up there that's been breached. I don't know if you folks have talked to me now, but it's when you have heavy rains, it flows like a river, like you wouldn't believe. And when it gets to the culvert, it's undersized. Like acts as a dam structure. So not a dam structure, but a dam
I got you.
structure. But so the water has no place to go, can't, it's like a bathtub, you only have this little hole at the bottom.
Can't drain.
You can't go through it. So I know from our discussions with DPW that they can't improve that because they're worried about what might happen downstream if they increase the flow under Lake Street. So it's, I've made a couple of proposals of sort, but it seems like nobody listens to what we're offered. So, but anyways, the water's there. It's fortunate that we have the extra area there for it to back up. Whether it goes over Lake Street, I have no control over that, but it's not gonna affect the road that we're building because we elevated it so that it won't impede on our roadway.
Okay,
I think Dominic has made comments about making sure that that's untreated water from the surface that won't get into our stormwater management system. So we're not treating it.
okay.
All right, so. But there are possibilities
Okay.
that we can help with.
Just a point of clarification, you indicated some of us may not be listening. This board is listening to the neighbors.
Well, but,
I just want to make that very clear.
but just so that we understand each other, the neighbors are voicing their concerns about existing conditions.
Correct.
What I'm proposing are things that help mitigate, potentially solve these concerns that the neighbors are raising. So I don't question the listening part, but when I've been doing this a long time, when we propose something based on what we know is causing a problem and nobody wants to listen to this possible solution, that's a problem.
Okay,
Okay, so we understand the concerns. We try to address concerns if we can, if they're our responsibility, if there are issues that we're creating as a result of our project, we certainly don't want to make things worse
Mhm.
than what they are. But you have an existing condition there now. I think there's a possibility that we could help that situation. We got planning board, we have conservation. Nobody's given us any kind of feedback or, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, or what are we gonna do?
May I? So what are you proposing to?
Well, I'm not gonna get into the discussion right now. I've had Conservation Commission out there. Well, quite honestly, that pond needs to be, the berm needs to be repaired.
Okay,
You have like that has to have a spillway, just like our detention basin needs a spillway when it gets certain height or volume of water. The same thing has to happen with that pond. You cannot have an uncontrolled opening in a dam
okay, so
that allows it to flow uncontrollably during peak heavy rainstorms.
that's very fair. And so is that proposal in front of Conservation Commission?
No, because nobody's,
So what's,
we can't even get. I don't want to get into the discussion that we have with conservation, but we can't get an answer out of anybody.
well,
So,
I'm just trying to get to the root. I mean, you're coming to the planning board and you're saying that there's a proposal, then you have these ideas to fix these things.
but it's the first step is conservation. Conservation doesn't allow us to do work in a resource area that there's no sense in having a discussion with the planning board. It's a conservation issue.
Okay, so,
So if we get that permission, then we can say, hey, we got an idea here that we think might work. And we get the blessings from the Conservation Commission to do a design, do some calculations, have it evaluated to see whether or not it helps the situation. I'm not gonna spend that time and money and expend on resources that if it's not taken seriously. And quite honestly, we've been at this, as you say, a year and a half, almost 2 years. I can't tell you how many times I've mentioned it to on various site walks. I've had the agent out there, 2 different agents out there, and I can't even get an answer on the replication area. So, but I'm happy to discuss it with the board. We can go out there. I've got photographs. You can see what I'm talking about. But it's pretty clear that there's a problem there that could be resolved a little bit.
So you already have something in mind?
Yeah.
So, listen, I'm not gonna twist your arm, but, I don't know what the harm would be in sharing it, so at least we've got a sense at the same time that you're dealing with conservation, but that's your call. If you wanna wait, it's just gonna drag it out, so.
It's not gonna drag anything out for me because I'm not,
Well, drag it
I'm
out
only
for us.
I'm resolving a problem. That's an existing condition that I can help. It doesn't affect my project or it doesn't affect the impacts of my project. I'm not making it worse. It's already there. But, I can't, there's a certain sequential evolution to these situations. You go to the board that has the jurisdiction over the area. If you can't get permission to do that kind of evaluate, if they don't think it's a good idea, then why waste the time and the money and the dialogue if nobody's listening? And that's what's happening. Nobody's listening. So even my engineer's given up on it. Just why waste your time? They're not listening. So.
I have one question on the side.
Pauline Aiello from Lakeview Ave. I have a question. Now, does this mean that the only roadway in and out of this development is going to be on Lake Street?
no, it's Prospect Street and Lake Street that's what's
And
proposed.
Franklin's approved it on Prospect Street?
There's no approvals through, there's nothing that's been submitted with Franklin, correct?
Okay.
So, no.
The only reason I'm asking about Lake Street is because the traffic study that was done initially by this company didn't have a road there, so it changed. It said wouldn't be any problem, going towards Prospect Street. It wouldn't change the amount of traffic. But if we're gonna be having a street coming on to Lake Street, it will change the amount of traffic.
That was evaluated at the last meeting by the peer reviewer, evaluated both Lake Street and Prospect Street. So it's been looked at in terms of the traffic and other things.
The initial review by Kimley Horn was revised to include the Lake Street one
Correct.
anyway.
Right.
So there were 2 that were submitted. The initial one, which had access only on Prospect Street. What was peer reviewed was the second revised traffic impact study that had just one access on Prospect Street, one on Lake Street. So, yeah.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you for the question. One last question, sir. Could you state your name and address this time? I don't think we're
John
caught.
Holman, Victor Street, Bellingham, we're in the Silver Lake District. Can the town clarify the status of review of the proposed sewer plans? Is there a peer review that's ongoing or has that been completed?
Nope, it's ongoing. So that was one of the comments, that October 23rd, 2024 letter that I just mentioned, that's through Kleinfelder. So Kleinfelder is a peer review consultant. They submitted one review letter that should also be on the website. It's probably buried a bit because it's dated October of last year, but there hasn't been any responses to that, but it sounds like we're gonna be seeing some responses to that letter. So it's ongoing, to answer your question.
And what is the time frame in which to complete that review?
Well, Kleinfelder would have to review whatever the responses are, including our DPW as well. So I don't know when that would, once we start talking about a continuance, that's where I was gonna start asking Lou what your time frame is, but we could get to that, when we discuss the continuance. That works.
Dave Nichols, 14, Blackmont Street. Will that peer review, include anything like a guarantee from Woonsocket that they will actually take? Does that only cover the Bellingham part, or will that also encompass the actions of Woonsocket, whether they will or not guarantee and?
Yeah, so we have an agreement with Woonsocket that was signed a while back, but we have a specific capacity for that sewer station, and I know we verified that the capacities are going to be able to be handled by
I
Woonsocket.
understand that we have the agreement for a certain volume and such, but Woonsocket having their problems with their septic plant is what my concern is.
Two different things.
Yeah, I think it's a signed agreement, so they can't legally tell us, no, you can't send septic sewage to our plant. But you are correct. I know I think it was their clarifier ended up. The paddle in it ended up corroding, and they also have issues with the sludge incinerating plant. There's quite a few issues there.
Yeah, I
I'm not
don't,
gonna get into it, but yes,
I live
you,
right at the low point, right where that line would be, and I don't really care to have my basement filled with the sewage from his project.
it's fair. That is a fair request.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public? I just want to thank you very much for your questions tonight. With short notice in the documents in front of you this evening. Again, thank you very much. Any comments on the board?
No, I'm gonna reserve my comments for, when I have time to review, BSC's responses. And then, wait for Rob to kind of get the punch list going. Because there's a lot of outstanding items that I think we're flying around, so I will reserve my comments for then.
Lou, I think you intend on giving us a better idea of the screening behind the homes on Prospect Street.
Right.
Can you give me a rough idea of what type of existing screening the homes on Prospect Street have on their properties outside of your project?
Well, the rear portion of their, as you know, these lots are in Franklin.
Yeah.
And so, the rear portions of their properties, we've created a berm across
Yeah.
the whole backside of where that was open. There's other portions of the site behind, the last 2 or 3 houses going towards Lake Street. Those already have natural vegetation that's there. But there's a stretch going from our roadway, proposed roadway off of Prospect Street down 2 or 3 houses that we created a berm because it was a low area. And those will be treed, and we've talked to the neighbors since we sold the lots to the builders, so there'll be a screening plan of evergreens and so on top of the berm. The berm is now 10 or 12 feet high. So that on top of that, there will be other screening vegetative evergreens that will be implemented on top of that. So it will be pretty high once it's completed.
Thank you. And then Dominic, I have a question for you. Before I review your comments, just number 10, portion of road C that includes grades is flat at 0.8% over significant length. Can you define significant length?
Oh, I'd have to dive into the plans, but it's basically generally speaking, let me actually have the plans up, so let me see if I can pull this.
See, I think of the road going out to Lake Street. Right.
Are there any concerns that those significant lengths fall in front of driveways? If or when there are, concerns with pitch and ponding?
Well, and that would go to the real need to have that good as built at the end to show that it doesn't.
I have a question, Dominic.
Yeah, it's road C, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a section, what's this? 6 to 9. That's I mean, it's several hundred feet,
Really?
I think he said several hundred.
several hundred feet, yeah.
So I don't want to dive too deep into it, but from my experience, your initial paving contractor is going to get it right. But as that road starts to settle and deteriorate and you have companies coming in to resurface it, that's when you can start to lose that pitch.
We'll make sure that the driveways pitch away from the units, so that
Okay.
you're not gonna have a situation where water from the roadway is going onto the driveways of the units.
Yeah.
So, but we'll make sure that there is an area along that stretch of road C that there are no buildings.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm not quite sure where the impact of the 1%, but there are ways, you know, in terms of the 1%, I don't know, Dominic, we can take a look at this, but you can have, instead of the crown in the middle, you could have the road tilted towards the outside of the road where there are no buildings. So would eliminate this puddling possibility, if you know what I'm talking about.
That's all I have.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways to do it and get it right, and it's just the confirmation that it's right. And as I said, it is allowed within the town, so.
So I'm surprised to see how much work there still actually is, a lot there. I don't know if I'd consider this punch list item or continuing things to work on, but let's get the list going. Dig in. That's all I'm gonna say.
No comments from me until I read through this and know what questions to ask.
I have some comments on a couple of items. I want to delve into it more. I agree with what Bill and Liz have said. So those are the comments from the board. Right, what's the next step?
Well, I guess, Lou, I thought Rob Truax is supposed to be on the call, but is he?
Yeah, he had a conflict.
Do you have a time frame at all that you know of that,
So,
because there is a substantial amount of work here and
well, it's not all his work, but I know it's.
I'm just meaning in general, I'm not just
Yeah.
saying Rob
I
Truax.
think I wouldn't mind getting the comments if you folks have the ability to review this material and getting your comments at the next meeting. And then, while we're continuing to work on the punch list of slopes. I mean, if you have comments that are related to the things that we're working on, we'd like to know whether or not you have what those comments are and whether or not we need to make a change or revision. So, I hate to take up the board's time with another meeting to get these comments. And that was the rub against having the meeting tonight when you only had it for one day or not even be able to read it, as opposed to continuing and having it 2 weeks down the line. So it might be helpful to us if we review this peer review, tell us what your comments are, or maybe you can get them to Rob somehow, and let us work on them if there are substantial issues that need to be addressed. And then we'll take those all into account as we prepare as we move this to a final. I don't think there's a lot there. So
My feeling is, as I said over an hour ago, we really haven't had time to go through this. I agree with the comments that were made. I think one of your last comments was probably the best, that we can give our concerns and discuss it with Rob. And he can communicate those with,
Yeah, I mean, whatever you want to do.
and Rob will have his own comments as well.
So I don't think I don't think we have to take up the board's time at a meeting. It's submitting,
No,
submit your.
no, I think Rob can hear from us.
Right,
Rob will probably know a lot more than we do. And he'll communicate.
sure. I think that's good. I think that's a good way to go, and we'll get the punch list going and we'll continue for 30 days or until when's the second meeting in May?
So the second meeting in May is a no-go. That one, That's a one item agenda meeting. That's at the high school auditorium.
It's nice not to draw a crowd like that.
We can't, not doing May 22nd, so. Do you? If you want,
So when's the next meeting after?
it'd be June 12th,
So May 15th is only 3 weeks away, right?
May
Oh, that's interesting. All right, so what's in June, what?
8th, June 12th.
So if we do a good enough job with our punch list and with our questions, we should be able to have stuff to you before June 12th, 2 weeks before June 12th, so you'd have a chance to review it and.
That's the hope.
you
And then if you
feel-
can, just let us know,
Yeah, no, I
so
think,
we can let these people know. There's
yeah,
no-
absolutely. I think that's a reasonable
So I have,
thing.
I have a quick question, a technical question. So if we review this, email Rob individually. Will our comments and questions, then will you turn those into like meeting notes and put them on this website for the public to read?
Yeah, so what I will do is I will create a document so everybody can be in tune with what's going on. I have my outline item punch list that I've started here on this document. I will put that into a document and add whatever additional comments that you may have to be addressed and responded to in a document. We'll put it on the website, so it'll be a public document. Everybody can have it, the board, the applicant, the public. And I think
A
that's,
list of waivers and all that, sort of, right?
it is.
Do we need to wait for that?
No, I would recommend,
To,
I would recommend at, you know, the next meeting to give your feedback on that, and that, I think that would be best, but obviously you need to look at the regulations and such. And I can even pull those out and send to the board. So with that, it sounds like the applicants continue, or requesting a continuance to June 12th. Our decision deadline is May 31st, so we need to push that out. I'd like to push that out if we can just do the end of July, just to be safe. All right,
Your call.
all right, we'll do that. So I would recommend a motion to continue the public hearing to June 12th, 2025, with an extension to the deadline decision date of July 31st, 2025. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask another question that's
Certainly.
related to, I know we're at the same period of time for town elections. Is there anything anticipated to change in terms of membership of the board?
I don't have that crystal ball, so
No, I mean,
We
is there,
can't answer that.
are there any candidate, I mean,
that's public
When's it-
information, so.
You can look it up on the town website.
oh, okay, well, I'm just curious because when is the town election? Is it in June or is it in May?
I think it's in June. The town meeting's in May.
June 3rd.
Yeah.
June 3rd. So when we get together on June 12th. Okay.
I believe one person had one last question.
Matty Roach, 31 Crystal Way, Bellingham. Lou, you made mention about Concom and that you have, a lot of people have concerns with the flooding. And you said that that's a Concom issue. When do you plan on presenting your ideas to Concom so people here know and can go to that meeting? Because you don't want to release any of the info from here and tell anybody, so.
Oh, well, you know, our next meeting with conservation, I think, May 14th. I'm not sure that, let's say this in this way. I'm not sure that they're receptive to introducing things that are not part of the application. In other words, they're preliminary discussions that may require another filing. I'm not gonna tie them up in the filing of the project. It would require another notice of intent specific to that particular area. So if they seem to be receptive to that, then we'll prepare something along those lines, but I'm not gonna disrupt the process that we have ongoing with the commission relative to This is strictly an offer that I'm.
That would probably be on if it's on an agenda, it'll be public. And that'll be public information, if and when it's on the agenda.
And you all get notice of that.
And I apologize. We went a little bit online here. We have a motion on the floor. Have a second?
Do we have a motion?
I don't think we have a
Okay,
motion.
the motion is made.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Any further discussion? Call for the vote.
Liz, I.
Nick, I.
Bill, I,
Steve, I.
that motion passes.
Great, thanks very much for your time, I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. for
Thank
your
you.
time.
And, Rob, we'll talk. next
And the
week.
public, thank you
Sounds
very
good.
much.
Yeah, thank you.
And we still have a meeting going on. You know, keep your conversation to a minimum outside. It'd be appreciated.
Thanks, Dominic.
No problem. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Yeah, thanks, Dominic. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you for coming. Yeah,
So the next item is, actually, the next two items are the two warrant articles for the Springtown meeting. I'm sorry, no, 123 Mendon Street. Sorry, my bad.
they've asked for continuance.
They have requested a continuance, so we should have the peer review back for that next week. So they're requesting a continuance. I did not want to have the first meeting in May because I figured they should have time to address it. And we are certainly not putting it on the second May.
In agreement.
So they're requesting a continuance to June 12th as well, and with a decision deadline extension to July 31st.
So moved.
Second, Nick.
We have a motion on the floor. It's been seconded for continuance, 123 Mendon Street. Next meeting on June 12th, decision deadline on July 31st. Any questions? I'd like to call for the vote.
Liz, I.
Nick, I.
Bill, I,
Go on.
Steve, I.
that motion passes unanimously.
Very good. Now we are on the warrant articles.
And the first one we want to talk about is warrant article for the accessory dwelling unit.
Correct.
Phil, do you want to read the public notice? I believe we have to legally read the public notice.
I would do that.
Pursuant to the town of Bellingham zoning law, chapter 240, article 12, the Bellingham Planning Board will hold a public meeting on Thursday, April 24th at 7 p.m. in the Arcane Meeting Room in the Municipal Center, 10 Mechanic Street, Bellingham, Mass. The article is to see if the town will vote to amend zoning map and zoning bylaw article 12, accessory use, by deleting the text of title of section 240-74 and insert in its place a new section 240-74 entitled accessory dwelling units, all set forth in the similarly titled document on file with the town clerk, or act or do anything thereof. Related to thereof too. A draft of the proposed amendments to the bylaw may be viewed at the planning and zoning office or town clerk's office in the municipal center, 10 Mechanic Street, Bellingham, Mass, during regular business hours. For questions, please contact the town planner at 508-657-2893.
All right. It's in my time. All
Thank
right,
you.
I will, I'll try to get through both of these items relatively quickly. I know we've discussed this one specifically already at this meeting, but just to kind of give an update on what's going on. So due to the housing crisis, the state has mandated that accessory dwelling units are allowed in single family zones by right. So Currently in town, our regulations for accessory dwelling units are only allowed for family apartments. That is what I have just pulled up on the screen here. That's section 240-74 in our zoning bylaws. And essentially what this is, it requires a special permit with the zoning board of appeals. There is owner occupancy requirements for the existing dwelling, and then there is occupancy requirements for a family member for the accessory unit. There are requirements or procedural requirements as well. That's the special permit. There's special permit criteria to allow one of these units. And essentially, it contradicts the state legislation that has been passed. One thing to note, this is different than the MBTA zoning where we had to adopt MBTA zoning to be in compliance. The way that this legislation is drafted is essentially you don't have to adopt any regulations. It just will take the place, this new legislation will take place of any contradicting regulations you have in your existing bylaws. So we have the bylaw review committee, and what my discussions with other planners in our state is we're all trying to get in front of the regulations a bit here because there are concerns with just allowing accessory dwelling units in any property. The intent here is with any zoning change, it has to go in front of the Attorney General for review and approval. So it'll first go to town meeting, the town will act on it. If it's approved, it goes to the Attorney General for review. The other side of this is, to make this a little bit more complicated, the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, AKA HLC, we'll call it that for now on. HLC creates draft regulations that will eventually be adopted by the Attorney General, which will be the boilerplate language for accessory dwelling units. Draft language, all right, going back, the legislation was enacted February 2nd. The draft language, not even the real language, the draft language was submitted to towns for review. I believe it was in March. So it was a month after these regulations were enacted, and these are draft. They did go through a review period with the public to comment. There were some glaring issues with it. And essentially what we believe, based on what HLC has said, is that they will be submitting new language, and it will be the official language, the official regulations in May. Which is problematic for towns that have spring town meetings because we needed to have this done months ago. So that's the background with this. So in order to try to be proactive, the bylaw review committee, I thought took an excellent stab at this. And just a second. I'm just going to go through the regulations very quickly. A lot of this stuff is from the draft language, but we added additional items in here just as added protection for what we see might be issues with this legislation. So this first section that's in here is, well, I guess the first section is regarding where these are allowed by right. It's allowed in single family zoning districts, which in our town, that is residential, suburban, and agricultural zoning districts. That's what's stated in here. Those are the three districts that these are allowed in by right. For definitions, specifically that first definition for accessory dwelling unit, ADU, this is where the crux of what is allowed is defined. So basically for these accessory dwelling units, you must have a gross floor area that is, or the maximum gross floor area of the ADU can be half the gross floor area of the principal dwelling or 900 square feet, whichever is greater. So 900 square feet is the largest that these accessory dwelling units can be. Gross floor area is defined through our zoning bylaws.
Greater or smaller?
Smaller, did I say greater? Sorry, smaller. So they have to be smaller than 900 square feet. 900 square feet is the max. Thank you, Phil, before I paint myself into a corner here. This is the dry run too, when I'm in front of the town meeting in the spring, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So, gross floor area, principal dwelling and protected use ADU are all defined in short-term rentals as well. These are all included in the draft language. Where we included the draft language and started adding additional items is in the section B, the development requirements. So one big question that came up is if you essentially, we're allowing one ADU per lot. This is specifically to hinder anyone's ability in shared use or shared areas such as like a condo association, where there might be some way to add an ADU per unit, not per lot. So the idea here is, and to meet the intent of the state's intent is to allow an ADU for a single family home. So if you have common ownership, if you get the approval through the condo association to put one ADU, I guess you'd be allowed to do it, but you're not going to be able to do an ADU for each unit. Critical.
So it's maxed out.
Correct, per lot. Temporary structures and trailers, which are defined already in our definitions, are not allowed as an ADU. So you can't just put a camper up or something in your yard and call it an accessory dwelling unit. Also, the ADUs, number 3, which is probably the most important item, you have to meet the intensity of use regulations. And what that is the setbacks from lot lines, height requirements, and I guess bulk requirements, which in this case is just height. So you have to meet whatever those requirements are in the district that they're building. So if there is a 10-foot front yard setback or 25-foot rear yard setback, the ADU cannot be within that setback. It has to meet the exact same regulations as the single family house has to. 4, this was actually in our previous regulations and it's the same with this. Board of Health, if it's on septic, you need to make sure that you meet the Title V requirements for that septic system. So you can't just tie into an existing one and make, you could do that as long as you had adequate sewage capacity, but that's difficult to do. So there's Title V requirements for that. They have to meet those requirements. 5, there's no on-street parking allowed. You have to have one off-street parking space for each ADU. That's required. Short-term rentals, so like a what do you call it? Airbnb, not allowed with the ADUs. That's 6. So, and that's defined in Mass General Law. A business use, not allowed in the ADUs as well. So it has to be a dwelling structure, and that's in any zoning district as well. 8 is just to add on the areas of common ownership. So multifamily dwellings, condos, townhouses, all those items, not permitted. 9 is regarding, this is a public safety requirement, making sure that if there's multiple structures, that the addresses are clearly marked and adequately illuminated. Additionally, any lighting has to deter any glare or spillover onto any abutting properties, which that's in our development plan anyway.
So it's dark sky compliant.
Correct. You cannot have any glare. It's going to be dark sky compliant. Those are already in our regs, but it's going to be additional, just a belt and suspenders approach on these. 10 is one that we added as well, and I'll just read it word for word. An ADU shall provide adequate access for emergency response as deemed adequate by the Bellingham public safety officials and be in compliance with all applicable state and local fire codes. That is really a big concern for these accessory dwelling units, because we need to make sure that there's adequate access for safety officials in case of an emergency. So, we added that one. And then 11 is regarding, it's actually adding some additional protections, basically stating that if there's some type of existing nonconformity, then it trips the special permit. So that way, not everything necessarily is allowed by right. So if you have an existing nonconforming structure, if you're creating more of a nonconformity, you're already required to go to ZBA for relief. And this is just kind of enunciating that, so nobody can pull the.
Making it clear.
Making it clear, because what you don't want it, and this is the issue that we're having now. People already, the regulations are enacted since February 2nd of this year. There's really no regulations to go off of, and we're trying to figure these things out to make sure that there's proper avenues. I don't believe that there has been any official building permits submitted for an ADU yet, but I know that there have been quite a few inquiries. So, that is the basics of the language. I will just add as well, as I mentioned, the regulations or the final regulations from the state should be enacted or basically approved in May. So we are taking the approach, the same approach that most towns are going with, that we feel that we have some pretty good language here. I don't know if the Attorney General will agree with everything we have. There is a chance that the Attorney General will say, you know, you have to strike these or add, you know, who knows? It might not get approved, but we fully intend that once the new regulations are out, we will most likely have an amendment to this for the fall town meeting to really firm this up. But at least this way, we will have guidance in place in the meantime. So we're really trying to be proactive here.
So, Rob, did town council review that language?
Yep. Yeah,
They're good with it.
they are. Yep.
So this is just to have some control, so it's not a total freeze.
Correct. That is correct.
And is the, because I'm trying to digest this all, so is this state's position that these ADUs can be, you know, it doesn't have to be family members, it could be, you know, someone could sign a year's lease and they could be Joe Schmo from
Yeah,
Indiana.
the other interesting thing about it is you don't even need to occupy the primary dwelling either. So you could rent that out and the ADU.
Yeah.
For the state regulation.
And that's where like the family apartment, for example,
Or the
the
opposite.
old special permit.
Or
You
could
had
rent
to have an
Florida.
owner occupancy requirement for the principal dwelling. And an occupancy requirement as a family member for the accessory.
Now,
So-
those are gone.
They are completely gone.
Yeah.
So,
But, so is it being proposed that obviously it's, you know, owner occupied on the primary residence, right?
No.
we are not.
Does not have to be.
Yeah, and
I can rent a house now and put an accessory dwelling unit in the backyard.
I should add this too. This is the crux of the regulations and why we did not take that approach. The state has made it clear that the protected ADUs, towns cannot regulate more than a single family residential house. Which is why you'll see that there's certain specific items in here that are crafted. So, for example, we cannot regulate for a single family house that it's owner occupied. That is why we can't do it for the ADU as well. We could attempt to do it.
Well, I mean, I understand, you know, someone who owns a house has a right to be able to rent that house out.
Yeah,
But if now you've got an ADU, I mean, again, you know, they could crap all over this at Attorney General's office, but, you know, to me, a reasonable condition is if you're gonna have, you know, an accessory unit, you know, that at least the owner occupied unit should be owner occupied. Otherwise, you can turn into two dumps.
Well, and I think this is really the crux of the conversation that we're having, and the concern is that really essentially what has happened now is that the single family zoning has basically been depleted throughout the entire state. And that's why we're trying to be as proactive as possible to get some language in this. What I would recommend is, Steve, because, you know, like I said, we're just trying to be proactive here, and we think that this is gonna come back in the fall anyway. To that point, we table the owner occupancy requirement for the principal dwelling. I'd be interested to see how the other towns around are dealing with the owner occupancy, if they've been adding that in their language, and to see if it's been struck. by
Because, I mean,
Attorney
the other,
General.
you know, the other thought is, you know, it may be better to ask for a little more.
Yeah.
Because the Attorney General's office can say, well, you know what, we agree, but you might want to back this out because, you know, taking the safe route, you're gonna be very hard to add that after the fact.
You don't ask, you don't get.
I would say that we are not taking the safe
Okay.
route, because that number, and specifically, the things that I could picture the Attorney General contesting with this is 10, which is probably the most important regarding the public safety officials review. 7, the business use. 2, the temporary structure or trailer.
You think they'll take issue with a temporary, a trailer?
It's a housing crisis, Steve.
People live in trailers.
Got a couple questions for you.
Give me a
Okay.
mistake.
I hope I
I
have
want to get my
answers.
opinion of the state.
Right, no, I hear you.
Rob, if I have a 4-bedroom house,
Yes,
the septic, it's, you know, suitable for that 4-bedroom home,
yes,
and I put an ADU,
yep.
that ADU would exceed the capacity of the septic for my 4-bedroom home. What are the options for homeowner?
So they,
Upgrade
yeah,
the
they
septic.
would have to upgrade the septic for the flows. There are options that you could do a deed restriction, but even that's complicated. That goes through the Board of Health. That's like different regulations, but the answer is they would have to upgrade their septic. And the one thing that I will say too is that when you start looking at existing septic systems, unless you just installed this within the last 3 years, adding another leach line isn't really an option with these things, because usually the distribution boxes are maxed out. Usually you're gonna have, I don't want to call it failure, but you're gonna have that biomat already, like, literally within 6 months of using that thing, it's gonna be, there's gonna be a biomat. You don't really want to start messing with that with an excavator.
Safe to say the septic is kind of a roadblock for a lot of.
Yes, because here's the other issue with it. Because the option is you're gonna have to have a pretty significant amount of land area to create. Because the most cost-effective option would be to create a separate septic system for the ADU.
Is that allowed?
You can do that. There are setback requirements.
But you need the land.
You need the land. And the other item too, that's critical to note is that if you build a 1-bedroom accessory dwelling unit, you are not allowed to create a 1-bedroom septic system in the state of Massachusetts through Title V, minimum 2. So the way that you design a septic system, it's 110 gallons per day per bedroom. So a 3-bedroom is 330 gallons per day, but Title V states a minimum sizing is 220, so 2 bedrooms.
Okay.
So basically, you would need to have a bigger system even for your 1-bedroom ADU.
And Rob, did you mention that it's limited to 1 bedroom?
It's not limited to
Oh,
one
it's not
bedrooms. It's
So-
900 square feet.
Yeah.
That's my next question. Well, I have my principal dwelling here. I decide to build a detached garage with an apartment above it. Does the total square footage of the garage plus that apartment count towards the 900, or is it just the apartment?
It's just the apartment. So yeah, because basically what you would do is you would have to submit a building permit for the actual livable space for that unit. and there are requirements through building code for egress, for smoke detectors, all that stuff, and Tim would basically review all that information and have to make sure that the 900 square feet is.
That's the other thing, if you only have a 1,200 square foot house, you can only do 600 square feet.
It's 50%.
Yeah.
Correct, 50% or 900, whichever is smaller.
Yeah, so the goal out of Boston is to increase housing. This gives the town some protection without turning every neighborhood into an ADU bill, where every house has it. It also gives protection to the town, like projects that we had in front of us just prior, where, you know, not every single home in there, which is townhouse, basically, if we didn't have this, could come and argue that each townhouse gets an ADU. And then you're turning whatever into whatever. So this is a reasonable thing that does provide some more housing, but then doesn't give it carte blanche to everything. And put some reasonable restrictions in for health, safety, and things that we should manage as a town.
Is there any research out there for what people are gonna be using this? Or is it rentals? Is it in-laws? Is it?
I think all the above, we don't,
Today,
Except short term.
today,
yeah, we can't do short.
yeah, so today, the bylaw, which goes through the zoning board, right? So basically, it's gotta be relative and there's all sorts of other things, but the state did away with all that, right? All the regulations that are currently in there that the zoning board would cover now is out the door, and this is the piece
I
that
think it's too new.
kind of pulls it.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows,
Well,
they can guess, but
yeah, I mean, I think there's still
popular.
towns
That
that
is
are
two
dealing with the.
That came
MBTA
up.
community.
Yeah.
yeah.
What about existing units that are in-law apartments that don't have in-laws, okay? I understand it may be considered an accessory dwelling unit, but what if it doesn't meet the requirements?
So if it's existing, it's existing.
Okay.
So and furthermore, if somebody came in and said, I have an existing in-law apartment in my house, so it's like a two-family. But you know, that was permitted before, it doesn't meet the requirements of the ADU, so I want to create another ADU on my property, so basically turns a single family into a three-family. That's where that non-conformity comes in which, all right, well, you're gonna go back to the Board of Appeals, like the special permit for the family apartments used to be done. And, because you're not allowed by right to do that. So,
What about handicap compliant?
ADA accessibility,
Yes.
it's not a requirement for single family houses, so it can't be a requirement for an ADU.
One last question for me.
You can ask as many as you want, Steve. It's a very interesting situation with this one.
So this is gonna go on the warrant.
Correct. It
So-
is on the warrant.
So how, if it can be done at all, how do you get the information to the public so they really understand this? Is there a way to do this before? Because you know how the town meetings work. Up comes the article, you know, it's a first time that a lot of people hear it and then, oh, this sounds good. Yep, no, it doesn't sound good. Nope.
Yeah, that's the main purpose for actually this forum with the public hearing planning board. I will say there have been multiple people who called the office asking about it, and I've gone through the AD regulations, which, to be honest with you, I think I've garnered a lot of positive feedback with just the fact that people know that, oh, the town is looking into this, because this has caught a lot of people off guard. I mean, there's been some articles, I think the Globe had one recently, and that was actually why there was a newspaper article, and I think I received 3 calls that day, or the day after, saying, whoa, are you guys aware of this? We are actually.
Okay.
Now, I do anticipate that there's gonna be a lot of conversation at town meeting. I don't really have the answer besides hopefully people will reach out to me. to the office, and obviously we'll have all this information. It's already available to the public, so we'll have all this information ready, and I intend to speak to it. I'm probably not gonna do a slideshow, but I'll pull up the regulations and do exactly what I did here to kind of go through the points.
This is a 2/3 vote.
Yes, because it's a zone change.
One procedure question.
Sure.
Have the, pamphlets been printed yet?
Yes.
Or just, when did the bylaw committee make the changes? Before the printing, or?
Yeah, it was before.
Oh, great.
I think with most of these though, especially like the floodplain one, which we're gonna be discussing next, that one's lengthy. So essentially, the article is saying to amend, it's basically the same as this public hearing notice. A little bit different, and that language I don't think is included in the actual warrant. We will have the language printed out and given to everybody in their packet when they show up to town meeting. though.
Okay,
So, but I understand your point of, is there a way to get more information to everybody sooner rather than later?
Yeah, I mean, and again, it is what it is. It's just that we all know what happens at town meeting.
Oh, yeah,
We know
absolutely.
exactly how that works.
The only concern that I have too is that if this gets pushed too much, I think people will start to think, all right, is there now an initiative in town to have a bunch of ADUs now, which is actually kind of the opposite here to try and regulate, so.
I just asked the public for some comments.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's a public
I had
hearing.
a quick comment. Rob, obviously you've done an awesome job being proactive and collaborating with a lot of other towns and groups around the state. So I really, applaud you for doing that.
Thank
But
you.
you just got me thinking, I've been traveling for the last couple of weeks and I was kind of staying up to date on what was going on in the town through the town's website. And I started getting some news bulletins like town news, right, about Earth Days being canceled. What if we had something at least sent out to those, citizens who subscribe to these town email blasts, just to let them know, because I agree, I think if people have an opportunity to think about it, and then when they hear your presentation, it's gonna make a lot of sense.
Yeah, definitely. I can look into it, certainly. Yeah.
Anyone else? Rob, what's your recommendation?
So this is sponsored through the planning board. I would ask that the planning board make a motion to recommend this to town meeting. And that's, you can either recommend, not recommend, or you can take no action. It's up to you. Please recommend.
Can I make a motion to recommend that, it goes to, town meeting with a recommendation from the planning board?
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? I have a little discussion here. I think the process of how we make recommendations to the planning board, it's a little off center for me. Regardless of what the five of us think, the public has the right to vote. And I just want to emphasize, I'm in agreement. But I think we need to analyze how this is done. Because we're just five people. And I believe everyone in town has the right to vote on this, regardless of if we're in favor of it or not. It's, their opinion that matters.
Well, that's what town meeting's for.
Yep.
Yeah, so.
Call for the vote.
Liz, I.
Nick, I.
Bill, aye.
Sure.
That motion passes unanimously.
All right.
Next item on the agenda.
Next item is the special flood hazard area revisions. I can run through this quickly if you want to just read the public hearing notice. While you do that, I'm gonna step out for 1 second. I'll run. I'm not gonna run.
Actually, can we have a 4-minute break? So we.
I'm already taking one. So moved.
So people can use the restroom.
I'm gonna pause the recording. Give me 1 second. All right, we're good to go.
Okay. I'd like to ask someone to read the public hearing, the first public notice for the floodplain item. Nick, can you please read that?
Sure. Pursuant to the Town of Bellingham zoning bylaws, chapter 240, article 16, the Bellingham Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Thursday, April 24th, 2025 at 7 p.m. in the Arcane Meeting Room in the Municipal Center at 10 Mechanic Street, Bellingham, Massachusetts. The article is to see if the town will vote to amend its zoning map and zoning bylaws. Article 16 entitled Special Flood Hazard Area Requirements by deleting the text and titles of section 240-110 and 240-111 and inserting in place thereof new sections 240-10 through 240-11, all is set forth in the similarly titled documents on file with the town clerk or act or do anything related to. A draft of the proposed amendments to the bylaws may be viewed at the Planning and Zoning Office or town clerk's office in the Municipal Center at 10 Mechanic Street in Bellingham, Massachusetts during regular Municipal Center business hours. For questions, please contact the town planner at 508-657-2893.
Thank you very much.
All right,
Mr.
so
Planner.
here's the overview on this one. This one's pretty straightforward. So we have in our zoning, the special flood hazard area, which that is a zoning overlay for our FEMA flood zone A and AE areas, which is the floodplain, where it floods during the 100-year storm event. So those are based on firm maps, which is flood insurance rate maps. I think the last time they were updated, or actually it's on here, it's in this section B. They were updated in 2012, and these are all the panel numbers. So these get updated every so often by FEMA. FEMA updated the ones in our area, and those are effective July 8th, July 8th of this year. So we have to update our regulations before the effective date. Otherwise, people who have flood insurance could potentially have issues keeping their flood insurance. We don't want that to happen. So on top of updating this section, which is the panel numbers, there's also some additional requirements that FEMA wanted us to add. And I will say that this is very boilerplate. It's very straightforward. I'll go over what has been added, but before I do that, just to show you what is existing, all our district really has is there's this section that delineates where the floodplain is and what panels are effective in Bellingham, which is the section B. And then the second section is the development regulations, which essentially states that, you can't fill in the floodplain without compensatory floodplain storage. There are requirements associated with subdivisions fully within a flood zone AE. And then also it specifies the state coordinator and the program specialist. It's very, very minimal in our current regulations. So the new regulations are update those panels, but also add some additional language that the state is now requiring, which I will go over quickly right now. Bear with me for a moment. I know the anticipation is killing you all.
Especially now that the Celtics, Patriots and draft.
Oh yeah, now we've got all night, right?
I wouldn't know that.
All right, so the first section, purpose. This has been added. This is based on everything except one section and I'll go over that one section, has been added based on the state language. purpose, this is boilerplate, this is from the language from the state, and basically just stating why the special flood hazard area is in place. Public safety, ensuring that property isn't destroyed, eliminating costs of cleanup for flooding, all of these things. Definitions, there's been a lot of additional definitions. These are also all straight from the state regulations. We define development, floodway, functional dependent, highest adjacent grade, historic structures, new construction, recreational vehicles, special flood hazard area, which in our case, this is the state language, but the zones that really affect us are the A and AE. AE means it has an elevation associated with it. Start of construction, substantial repair, variance, and violation. Those are the definitions straight from the state regulations. This other section, designation of community floodplain administrator, we now have to have one. We already had one, it just, the title wasn't really official. That's our building inspector, Tim Icardi. He is now the designated community floodplain administrator. Next time you see him, you can congratulate him. I'm sure he will really appreciate it. I'm being sarcastic. District establishments, the panels have been updated in this section B. And you'll see that now the effective date is July 8th, 2025. So that's been updated. That was really the critical thing that needed to be updated to make sure people were referencing the correct information. And then the last section, I'm sorry, I think there's two more sections after this, but the development regulations have been added, or there's been items added to this. And these are all from the state standards and what was already existing, with the exception of, I'll show you exactly which one. I'm sorry, I think I'm in the wrong section. Yeah, sorry. So this has all been, nothing has really changed in this section with the exception of the state coordinator and program specialist has been reduced to these titles. There's some additional information that's been added based on the state language. And then the item that I added has really been, it's this section 240-115. So the state language for the required permits, we require a special permit for work within a floodplain if there's any removal or additional work being done in those, unless it's covered under another special permit. But in this case, the language was pretty minimal. Like there was no requirement for like submission requirements for this. So I added this section B for the required permits. And I will also add that this has all been reviewed by our FEMA administrator, and we have 2 thumbs up that all this is good to go. We'll be in compliance if this gets passed, but essentially we will require a plan that's stamped by a licensed surveyor or professional engineer. It has to have existing and proposed contours in no greater than 2-foot intervals. The base flood elevation or approximate location of the zone A boundary needs to be shown. Existing and proposed site features that affect that flood hazard area need to be shown. And 5, proposed fill volumes and compensatory flood storage volumes labeled in staged storage increments at a maximum of 1-foot intervals need to be shown. And I will just quickly state the reason for that is in a floodplain, if you basically if you fill in a certain amount, you cannot just dig a hole somewhere with the same volume. It all has to be based on elevations, because if you're filling at a certain elevation and creating more storage above that elevation, it's going to cause downstream flooding. So that's why you have to do it in this certain manner. It is specifically stated now in our regulations because it wasn't before. And then lastly, the other section, which this all again is from the state. We are required to submit new technical data anytime there is any adjustments to the FEMA maps. You know, that, it doesn't happen very often, because usually what happens is the updates to FEMA maps are usually done with the private development side. It's not usually the town unless we do a flood study, which we might be doing actually in the near future. But, that's a whole other discussion. But basically, we're required to submit that information to the state, which we would anyway. Because the state would probably be doing the flood study, but, that's the point for this, the requirements for the new data. And then lastly, there's this variance requirement, which basically if you you can submit a variance. You need to have some really, really good hardship for that. I've never heard of a variance being granted for floodplain standards, but essentially that goes to, I think it goes to the state actually for that requirement. It doesn't even go to the town, but that's this other section that was included. That's straight from the state text. And then these last two sections as well are straight from the state text as well, which the disclaimer of liability and I can't even pronounce it, the other one. So, that's basically what has been submitted. This is the language that the state has required. We have added it to our bylaws and they have reviewed it. They agree with everything. And, that's essentially the lowdown. A lot of technical stuff. And like I said, a lot of boilerplate information. I will say that I did look quickly at the map amendments. There really weren't too many between 2012 and now 2025. So there's really no drastic changes to any of the floodplains, so, which is good. So, but that's basically the information for the special flood hazard area.
I would entertain a motion to move this amendment forward to the plan, to the town meeting.
I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments.
I'm sorry. Kind of boring topic.
It's a very boring topic.
As long as Rob's presenting it at the town meeting.
I will be presenting.
I will second it.
Anyone in the audience, anyone in the board have any questions? I've been dealing with this since.
Flashing back. Flashing back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All my life.
Is that a motion?
The motion.
Motion to recommend town meeting.
Yes,
Excellent.
I'll second that.
all for the vote,
Liz, I.
Nick, aye.
Bill, aye?
Go on.
Eli.
Excellent. All right, those are the warrants. We have one more for our next meeting. That's the livestock one through the Board of Health. Dylan will. And the planning board is not the sponsor for that one. That is the select board, but it is a zone change, so it has to come in front of the planning board. It was supposed to be on this one, but there are some legal ad delays. So that'll be on the May 8th meeting.
A&R plan,
A&R plan, Bungay Brook. That one, this is another very simple item, which is good. Basically, let me pull up the plan. If you're familiar with Bungay Brook,
I drove through there last week, they're doing a nice job.
it is coming together.
Right.
It is coming together quite nicely.
It's gotten very expensive.
That it has.
It's not affordable housing.
Didn't have to be.
No, I know.
I haven't been through there.
I recommend. Beautiful.
They've done a great job.
All right, so. If you're familiar with the development or the golf course. So this is Locust Street. This is the entrance, which is the boulevard entrance to the development. There's an existing house that was actually A&R'd previously because somebody bought it.
And
The intent was there's this existing maintenance building that was used for the golf course. The intent was to use that for the condo association. However, that is no longer an option. So the person that purchased this 2.5-story house is going to purchase this from the developer. So the good news is that with this being taken out, you don't have to worry about, the very large Bungay Brook, you know, any nonconformities or anything, because the big lot meets all those requirements. The other thing too is you don't really have to worry about frontage or access for this because this has been labeled as parcel A, not a buildable lot. So basically, they just need to separate it and then it will be conveyed to that owner through the deeds. So it's very straightforward. I would recommend endorsing the A and R, especially because this is not a buildable lot, so you don't have to worry about any odd trickery or anything with this one.
Parcel A and parcel 2 become. They're not becoming one, they're becoming same ownership, or they're becoming.
Correct. If they can merge the lots and it will automatically merge if they're under the same ownership. So there's really no. Yeah, there's like no, the planning board isn't going to have to like vote on allowing the merger of the two lots. So, so basically they'll be under common ownership. And if they do want to eventually merge them, they can, but, and get rid of this lot line, but.
There's 2 houses on, when you add the 2 together, there's 2 houses, and no big enough area there.
Yeah, so this is actually an accessory building, so it's not a dwelling, because there's no, well, it doesn't meet the requirements through building code as a dwelling unit.
Okay, so it's not a non-conforming, we're not creating a non-conforming here.
Nope, not creating a non-conformity, so.
It's a garage, basically.
Yeah.
Almost a shack, right?
Yeah.
It's a nice building, like 3 bays.
Keep the lawn more there.
Yeah.
Well, that was, the intent actually, from what I understand was, I believe the condo association was potentially, or the developer was gonna see if the condo association would take ownership of that and they could actually rent out the storage areas because if somebody has, well, they already have, I think it's 2-car garages in the units. But if somebody had like a classic car or something that they wanted to store on site, they could rent that unit out, but this is, it's a condo association, so there's a lot of, I don't want to say red tape, but there's certain restrictions upon it, so. Yeah, you know, Marty, you're,
Yep.
yeah, so, anyway, that's the gist of the A and R.
I would entertain a motion.
Just to endorse it.
Yeah, just
Excuse
to
me?
endorse the A and R.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second, Bill.
We have a motion on the floor that has been seconded. To endorse the A and R from Bungay Brook. I'll call for the vote.
Yes, I.
Next, I.
Bill, aye.
Bill,
Motion passes unanimously.
That'll just need to be signed
Just
before,
one copy?
just one copy, it's just the Mylar, because that'll go to the registry. Then the only thing left are the approval of the minutes for, we have 2, the March 27th and April 10th.
Do you have any comments on either minutes?
Yeah, March 27th, page 3. Paragraph that starts Mr. Devine.
All right, hold on one
I'll
second.
give you this in a minute.
Yeah, if you could.
So citing the second line there, let me just give you this. So what it basically says is the end of it says citing the presence of ledge on the property. So I didn't say there was ledge on the property. I said ledge in that section of town.
Which, so March 20, which page is it?
Right, how can you do that? So I wasn't saying there was ledge on the property.
Oh, you're
There's
saying
ledge in
section.
that section of town.
So basically, we'll be striking on the property and we will be adding in the section of town.
Please.
You got it. That's easy.
Any other changes?
Yeah.
Is that Pine Street? Was that the Payne Street? Oh, there's a ledge on that golf.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, I know there is.
yeah, in that section, the section of town, I think is the reference, so.
It was.
Yeah.
No other comments?
Okay.
Entertain a motion to accept as amended.
So moved.
Second,
Second by Phil.
we have a motion on the floor to accept the minutes as amended. Call for the vote, any discussion? Call for the vote.
Liz, I.
Nick, I.
Bill, on.
Bill, aye.
Next item is the minutes for April 10th. Well, a chance to review them. I found no comments from you.
A lot more brief than the
Yes.
March 27th.
Well, I'm glad I read it last.
There
I
you go.
move to approve the April 10th minutes.
Do I have a second?
I just noted it.
Second, Phil.
The motion on the floor has been seconded. Any discussion? Call for the vote.
Liz, I.
Nick, I.
Bill, on, excuse me.
Bill, aye.
That motion passes unanimously. Ladies and gentlemen, our next meeting will be Thursday, May 8th at 7:00 here. Motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Call for the vote.
Liz, I.
Nick, I.
Bill, on.
Bill, aye.
We are adjourned.